Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
So 1 year ago this month, President Trump provoked the appointment of a special prosecutor after the president fired the FBI director who was investigating Russian influence in the presidential campaign. Then, the president admitted on national television that he fired the FBI director because of the Russia investigation.
Regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, you know, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story.
And not long after that, there was a massive shakeup in the Trump White House with Steve Bannon, Sean Spicer, and Reince Priebus all eventually leaving. Former Marine General John Kelly replaced Reince Priebus as the White House Chief of Staff. Many in the political media seemed to believe that John Kelly would put an end to the chaos in the Trump White House because John Kelly would be the so-called adult in the room. One believer in John Kelly mythology as the savior of the Trump White House is John Kelly himself, who actually recently said this on NPR.
In retrospect, I wish I had been here from day one. In terms of staffing or serving the president, that first 6 months was pretty chaotic. And there were people hired that maybe shouldn't have been hired. But no, it's not that things were a disaster that first 6 months, but I believe they could have been better.
Okay, so John Kelly now says that when Reince Priebus was White House Chief of Staff, that first 6 months was pretty chaotic. Those are his words. It turns out that the only thing in presidential history more chaotic than the first 6 months of the Trump presidency is the John Kelly period as Chief of Staff. Here's a sample of what's happened in John Kelly's White House. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson called the president a moron in a private meeting, and of course those private words were leaked and became public. Donald Trump campaigned for an alleged child molester in the U.S. Senate race in Alabama. In a press conference, Donald Trump called Nazis and white supremacists good people, with John Kelly in the room watching from the sidelines. John Kelly did nothing to stop the president from nominating his personal physician, Ronnie Jackson, to be Secretary of Veterans Affairs, a nomination that was obviously doomed from the start. John Kelly made the Rob Porter scandal much, much worse by protecting Rob Porter for days after Porter's former wives accused him of abuse. And of course, who could ever forget John Kelly getting caught in an angry lie about President Obama and a black Congresswoman, Frederica Wilson, lies for which John Kelly has never apologized.
And a Congresswoman stood up, and in the long tradition of empty barrels making the most noise, stood up there and all of that, and talked about how she was instrumental in getting the funding for that building, and how she took care of her constituents because she got the money, and she just called up President Obama, and on that phone call, he gave the money, the $20 million to build the building. And she sat down, and we were stunned that she'd done it. even for someone that is that empty a barrel. We were stunned.
Joining our discussion now, Joy Reid, the host of AM Joy Weekend Mornings on MSNBC, and Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. Joy, that video is now just the indelible image of John Kelly. Every word he said was untrue, and he has, to this day, never had the decency to apologize.
Right, and let's not forget that he, went after Congresswoman Frederica Wilson in the course of Congresswoman Frederica Wilson defending the family of a fallen soldier, David Johnson, and that was a personal friend of the family. She was trying to advocate for her constituent and trying to find out how this young man had died. And in the course of putting her down, John Kelly, in a sense, also dismissed that family, who were being called liars by the President of the United States, by the way. And John Kelly, whose son, valiantly, died in war, never defended the family. And it's interesting that John Kelly says that things would have been so much better had he been there from the beginning. Well, let's not forget he was there from the beginning. Remember, he was Homeland Security Director during the Muslim travel ban, which apparently he found out about belatedly but was totally fine with. He was there running ICE before his now protege is running ICE and terrifying immigrants all over the country. At least Reince Priebus didn't do interviews in which he displayed a lack of knowledge of the Civil War, makes himself the story, defended a beater. In a way, we might look back at the Reince Priebus era as kind of the golden years or the golden era of the Trump administration.
Well, I have in terms of Trump White House chiefs of staff. It seems to me one is better than the other, and I can't see what's better about John Kelly's run than Reince Priebus's run.
No, and we're talking about a very low bar here.
Reince Priebus set the lowest bar ever, and John Kelly couldn't get over it.
Right. So look, Lawrence, I was one of those members of the media who, when General Kelly was made chief of staff, who wrote a piece saying, all right, here comes a general. He's going to bring some order to the chaos in the West Wing. However,
by the way, I thought that was perfectly reasonable optimism.
Right.
This guy does know something one thought about organization and chain of command.
Right. Also in that piece, I said his firing of Anthony Scaramucci will probably be the high point of his tenure. I was hoping I'd be wrong. I'm not wrong. It was the high point of his tenure. The montage that you showed is it boggles the mind that a person who is supposed to be, when it comes to the White House and the Oval Office, the second most powerful person in the building, and even he, a former general, cannot bring control to that complex. And we all know the reason why. Mm-hmm. No matter who the chief of staff is, the president is the problem. He has been the problem. He is the problem. He will be the problem. So anyone who takes a job in that administration, particularly in the West Wing, better know that before they even take it.
And what strikes me about John Kelly is he is the same kind of problem that the president is.
Right.
We just showed videotape of John Kelly lying word for word about a member of Congress. We can't show you that videotape about anyone else who's ever worked in the White House. There's no one else who we can show you. Here's the day that the White House chief of staff under any president got up and lyingly insulted a member of Congress.
Well, and did it in the same way Donald Trump would. I mean, the problem with John Kelly is that he is Donald Trump with, bars on his chest, right? He has the same attitude toward immigrants in general. He has the same attitude, this sort of women are supposed to be sacred, but not to me, John Kelly, when I'm dissing one who's a member of Congress. Never apologizing. These weird attitudes about, again, the Civil War. He isn't that much more sort of ideologically disciplined than Donald Trump. And so he can't rein in those aspects of Donald Trump's nature because he shares Donald Trump's ideological predilections. So what he's changing, I don't know, maybe Trump respects him a little bit more than he respects Reince Priebus. Let's face it, he kind of respects almost everyone more than he respected Reince Priebus. So I don't know that is that much of an improvement. I mean, he did fire Omarosa, but then she almost stormed the residence in the process of being fired by John Kelly. So I don't even know if he did that well.
It is Tuesday, the 29th of May of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. That's right, folks. No Old Bay. Do not put Old Bay into any dish in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Don't. All right, now that we got that out of the way. Hey, 13 angry Democrats. I guess that's supposed to supersede the 12 angry birds that are going to jail. That's right, jailbirds. 12 angry jailbirds. At least there's 19 indictments. And some angry jailbirds have already pleaded guilty. Oh, boy. Rudy Giuliani got booed. They're calling it booze at Yankee Stadium for his birthday. But I listened to the tape, and it really sounds like F-U, except they had the U-C-K after the F. So it's too early in the morning. I don't want to start with, the Germanic invectives so early, please. Even though the so-called President of the United States has been up tweeting angrily because apparently there's some big-time indictments coming down. And now he has perpetrated the lie that Mueller, that terrible anti-American personage, will meddle with the elections. These people are shameless. Oh, and a little word of advice. Do not engage, somebody from InfoWars. I don't mean someone who watches InfoWars, but I mean somebody in InfoWars, because they just delay you. I'm like way behind what I needed to do today to prepare for the show, because I stupidly answered a tweet from someone who, they sound like Russian bots, okay? And then you find out, they're probably brainwashed. And then you realize, no, they're assets. Boy, and so don't feed the trolls. Let them be. And then you can get your work done, because we have a busy life. And even busier now that we got this guy running the show. And they hated the black man so much. They hated him, and this is what we get. They warned us. They said if we elect the black man, they're gonna punish us, and this is the punishment. All right. Well, let's get on with what we have on the menu today for you at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. At the top, that was Lawrence O'Donnell and crew. Yeah, Joyanne Reed was there. And pretty much breaking down the chaos that is never-ending and ongoing. I don't know. It's ongoing and never-ending. Is that redundant? Yes, it is. But it's chaos. And they love that chaos, apparently. I don't know. There is I'm a passionate human being, but I like a little bit of order in my life too, things placed properly and with intention on my shelves, very few. And if you got one of those little sand gardens that you can rake out, those are fun too. The transience of existence. That's order in the chaos. I'm sorry. I just like a little bit of order, and yeah. Okay, well, enough about that. Thank you, Lawrence, for breaking that down for us and reminding us, because we need to be reminded. On the rest of the menu, the New York Times sympathetic coverage of white moms struggling with opioids contrasts so sharply with its hysteria over crack babies. It's almost like night and day. Black and white, night and day. Scientific research reveals Trump dehumanizes minorities to gain the approval of angry whites. They hadn't codified it yet. And now they've measured it, and it's true. Our feelings, our idea, the anecdotal evidence proves to be correct. Who knew? And Mamoudou Gassama, the hero immigrant from Mali, one of those S-hole countries Trump hates because there's black people who live there. And that guy scaled 4 stories up the side of a building to rescue a dangling baby. Well, he arrived in France a couple of months ago as, I guess, our terms would be an illegal immigrant. He's a refugee. But he's going to be granted full French citizenship. Because France is the cradle of civilization. After the break, we'll move to the chef's table, where the delicate balance in Trump's brain between glorification and mortification can tip either way at any moment. Yeah, we're experiencing it this morning. And if Rudy Giuliani is getting booed at Yankee Stadium, where is Trump going to live if he's given house arrest instead of an isolation pod at a Supermax lockdown? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. If you look to the right of the page, there is the chat room link there. Kelly Lincoln, our roaring girl, monitors that and responds rather quickly if she's not already on it. So that's a fair way to engage us. Go to the leftish of the homepage there from the chat room link, and you will notice the contribute, donate buttons. Those are integral parts of this enterprise because your generosity allows us to broadcast resistance radio. And we're very grateful for your generosity. And, well, I mean, to be honest, keep it up, please. Let's see. Follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom will take care of that. And he does it, as I say, rather deftly. We're on Facebook, too. If you want to go there, I usually go to Facebook to post garden photos and maybe tweak a few Trump bro family members. But if you want to go there, you can. You know, they're just going to give all of your information to a hostile foreign power anyway. So, I don't know. You can choose. What else? Oh, yes. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. And I post show notes and links on my Daily Co's diary about 10 minutes before showtime. And I can be found there as Justice Putnam. And I think that if you look for the Justice Department on netrootsradio.com, I may still have the .com part on that, you'll probably be able to find the show notes and links that way as well. All right. Memorial Day, we went to the local ceremony here in our small little town of Rogue River. And it was quite lovely. And I saw a lot of my neighbors. So, you know, I see the guy who's the commander of the VFW hall. Now I know who the commander of the VFW hall is. I've seen the mayor around, but didn't know that was the mayor. Yeah, well, let's get on with this menu here about the New York Times sympathetic coverage of white moms on opioids. Boy, I don't know, the crack baby epidemic. I love that one. I mean, there's no science behind it. People thought it was true. I mean, my sister is a registered nurse, worked at Children's Hospital. And, you know, she would describe a crack baby. Well, yeah, there are abnormalities that can occur during the gestation of a fetus, an embryo and a fetus. And many factors can come into play, like, I don't know, spraying Raid ant spray. That might have something to do with it. Or Roundup in your yard so you have a really nice, pretty yard. And you don't even have to do that. Your neighbors can, and you may suffer the ramifications of it, and that is indeed what can happen. And so the crack baby, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think crack is probably not a good thing to do when you're pregnant. So, the photo on the cover of the magazine was the image of a young white mother holding a cherub-like infant dressed in pink stockings and lace. The mother is on her knees, gently kissing her daughter's neck. Her face is obscured. The image goes to great lengths to protect the mother and the child. They are both innocent victims of an opioid epidemic. The article begins with the story of Alicia. The setup immediately renders Alicia's humanity. She struggled with drugs and alcohol from a young age. Her family had bouts with both substance misuse and mental illness. her mother acting as the glue held the family together in the suburbs of Rhode Island. We learn of Alicia's dreams and her struggles before ever learning of her addiction to Percocet. Even as Alicia's use bloomed, the writer recognized Alicia's need to use the drugs as a coping tool to calm her anxieties, to quiet the voices that drove her toward self-sabotage. Alicia's drug use did not diminish her humanity. It made her more salient, more immutable. The lives of the women profiled in the story are complex, and the writer makes great effort to mute her judgments and witness the mothers nurturing their children. But, like many major publications that have reported on the opioid epidemic, the New York Times has a history of covering societal drug use. Often, publications reference the differential response to the opioid epidemic and the way that race has influenced political response. Coverage of the opioid epidemic alludes to the cultural overreaction to the crack baby and the panic over crack use in general. Less often do publications take responsibility for the role they played in influencing the way people respond to drug users. In a similar way, how the New York Times had no problem calling the Clintons liars, questioning the motives of the black president. But you can't call Trump a liar, and we just can't really know the motives of this man now, can we? Funny how that works. It's almost like they're addicted to something. Access? Or maybe they're being paid. Let's not go there. Those who took issue with coverage did it out of frustration. Their memories are not short. They recall the dehumanization of black women and their children who did not benefit from the gentle words of a famed novelist. It is apt that the light shone on the New York Times, a publication that proffered racist and sensationalized journalism, depicting black people as crazed cocaine addicts, and black children born to mothers who use cocaine as broken and irredeemable. It is not hyperbolic to claim that the New York Times had a role in the creation of the modern war on drugs, one it now deems to be a failure. Well, to be fair, the New York Times is not an amorphous entity. They are made up of individual reporters, and there's going to be a tug and a pull and a give and a take. And I suppose people will evolve and mature over time. But it is quite interesting how if you wanted to substitute the demonization of the crack mom with the demonization of the Hillary woman, just interesting, isn't it now? No, I failed to mention that the article that I riffed off of was by Joyce McMillan at Salon. So, sorry, Joyce. I should have told that up top. Okay, this next article is by the great T-Bug out of Raw Story, of course. Writing for the New York Times, demographics expert Thomas Edsel looked askance at Donald Trump calling members of MS-13 animals during a rant on undocumented immigrants and tried to figure out a more scientific approach as to why Trump used the highly inflammatory rhetoric. According to Edsel, through gut or gutter instinct, Trump has adopted a political strategy designed to exploit anger at and resentment toward immigrants, as well as racial and ethnic minorities. This is the linchpin of his approach to the 2020 election. Now, as an historian, I might cite the work of Goebbels as being maybe a document in which this strategy could have manifested itself from. You know, the big lie? Might as well codify it and see how it works and why. He notes that his colleagues, David Leonhardt and Ian Prasad Philbrick, once wrote, Donald Trump has been obsessed with race for his entire time he has been a public figure. He had a history of making racist comments as a New York real estate developer in the 70s and 80s. More recently, his political rise was built on promulgating the lie that the nation's first black president was born in Kenya. They continued. Trump himself has claimed that he is the least racist person, but here's the truth. Donald Trump is a racist. He talks about and treats people differently based on their race. He has done so for years, and he is still doing so. To get to the root of the matter of why Trump descends into lowbrow racism, Edsel said he turned to Boise State political scientist Stefan Utich, who authored the study, How Dehumanization Influences Attitudes Towards Immigrants. Well, those of us of a certain age remember a certain movie called The Face of the Enemy, in which, we saw how the dehumanization of the other makes it easier to kill them. You know, it's a little bit harder to kill someone that you know. But if you don't know someone, and what you do know of them is, well, you know, a broad brush, triggering that lizard part of the brain in which you want to get rid of that which is different. I don't know. I thought we were supposed to evolve past lizards. Maybe that's why they're against evolution. Maybe. So this goes on to describe how either through just gut or gutter instinct, Trump uses this strategy, or it is conscious. It works. It absolutely works. And he'll continue using it. And I suppose, we might as well admit it. And science has codified it, so he concluded that the trend appears to be growing. And we may not be able to gauge the future of the U.S. in a post-Trump presidency. Trump is a powerful force propelling the erosion of standards in our political life and throughout the broader social order. In a decivilizational process about which I've written before, he wrote, his stunning political success suggests that this trend has progressed further than most of us recognize, much less understand. Offering here in the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays, is by Elizabeth Pressa from Alternate. It is a very heartening story about what I believe is the basic humanity of we humans. It's a little disheartening to think that this hero would be arrested and then processed through a torture facility before being deported. In France, they do things a little bit differently, and this is very heartening. Now, of course, I'm sure many of you have seen the footage of this 22-year-old Mali immigrant scaling this the side of this building, going right up the balconies of a Parisian building, 4 stories. And I got to tell you, the guy had to have done parkour, because he did all the moves that one would normally do with parkour. And but he scaled this building and saved this little toddler dangling out. How this baby got on the other side of the railing, I can't figure out. But what did occur is that I guess the dad of this baby had left for whatever reason. Maybe needed to go to another village to pick up some guitons. They're in Paris, but maybe he had to go to Rennes. But he was gone, and he has been arrested, will be charged in September for abandoning his parental responsibilities. But Mamoudou Gassama, the 22-year-old Malian, will be granted full French citizenship, and he sat with Emmanuel Macron, said that he didn't think about helping the child, he just climbed up and God helped him. He said, I like children, I would have hated to see him getting hurt. I looked for solutions to save him, and thank God I scaled the front of the building to the balcony. So Macron's going to set him up with a job to train as a firefighter, which is great. But, I would think, why don't we train the guy to be a physicist? He has all of the inherent understanding of gravity and mass and velocity. So mix that with humanity, and we might be able to save the world now, won't we? Let's get to our break, and we'll come back, go through weather from around the world, and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Another day, another mass shooting at another school. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. This time in Santa Fe, Texas. And so one more time, America is debating the Second Amendment, which says, quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment was interpreted by the Supreme Court in 2008 in the Heller case. There, the court found that the words about a militia didn't mean much of anything and ruled that the Second Amendment created an individual right to guns. But that right, according to the majority opinion written by Justice Scalia, is not unlimited. Quote, nothing in this opinion shall be taken to cast doubt on the long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places, such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. End quote. And so, while it is absolutely correct that gun laws in the United States now must be governed by the Second Amendment, and some things remain undecided, it is also true that many gun safety laws proposed in recent years are not prohibited by that constitutional provision. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour report recorded on Monday, May 28th, 2018. I'm Mark Boulanger. Hundreds of unionists from around the world are in Geneva this week and next for the annual conference of the UN's International Labour Organization. The ILO is the United Nations agency which focuses on matters of work in the world. It is operated as a tripartite organization with representatives of governments, employer groups, and labor unions. One of its main activities is the development of proposed international laws called conventions, which member states can adopt. At this year's conference, a convention on violence and harassment at work will be debated. I talked to Chitty King about the proposed convention. Ms. King is the director of the Equality Department of the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the global body which represents national union centers such as the Ghana Trades Union Congress. I asked Ms. King to describe the proposed convention on violence and harassment at work.
Well, I should probably start by saying that although the focus of our campaign at the ITUC and the campaign of our partner unions has been focused on gender-based violence, the ILO will actually discuss this summer the possibility of a convention and recommendation on violence and harassment in the world of work, so covering all workers. We had a focus on gender-based violence because even though great progress has been made in many respects towards gender equality and equity, there's still quite a bit of unfinished business. So progress has been made, for instance, in areas such as pay and leadership, but arguably the area in which we've made the least progress is in tackling gender-based violence in the world of work, and this is one of the most egregious and persistent violations of human rights in the world of work.
Do you have an idea of how widespread the problem of violence at work is?
We have statistics coming from various parts of the world. So, for example, if we were looking globally, we would say that at least 35% of women have experienced some form of sexual or physical violence. And this covers the home, the communities, as well as the workplace.
What would be the effect of the ILO's adoption of a convention on violence and harassment at work?
Well, I think one of the most important things that an international labour standard could do is signal very clearly that violence and harassment are simply not part of the job. Many workers, particularly women workers, given their often subordinate positions in the workplace, experience forms of violence and gender-based violence almost on a daily basis, but are either too afraid to speak up, whether it's fearing retaliation, including the loss of their job, or just feeling that nothing much will be done about it. And I think we saw quite a little bit of this phenomenon, or quite a lot of this phenomenon, in the social media outpouring that came along with #MeToo, etc. So sending this strong message that gender-based violence or violence and harassment are simply unacceptable and not part of the job.
How could labor unions use a convention on violence and harassment at work?
Well, I think it would be a very useful tool in the army of trade unions in terms of social dialogue engagement, for one thing. So in countries especially where legislation may be already quite advanced, it would give the unions in those countries clear direction in terms of what they should be engaging in, their governments and employers, to improve the situation. In other countries where there might be little to no regulation on this, again, it would give trade unions a very clear direction on what needs to be addressed or what needs to be put in place in order to address violence and harassment in the world of work. It would raise it up the union agenda, hopefully see more, although we're seeing an increase already in terms of collective bargaining activity, for instance, around this. It should certainly raise it up trade union collective bargaining agenda. And just in terms, again, of awareness-raising activities, it gives us an international baseline around which to engage with employers, engage with government, in order to finally address this issue with the urgency and seriousness it deserves.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. Follow us on Twitter @Radio Labor. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Okay, thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Okay, so it's quite a lovely day, and why don't we begin with weather from around the world? And we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, about 55 degrees. We're going to be much cooler than yesterday here at the mothership at Positively 3rd and Marie. We were almost 90. So we will be in the mid to upper 70s today, which some might consider to be quite a drop, but it will be pleasant. Of course it will. And the lower temps is mostly because we will be mostly cloudy today. And okay, I'll take it. The winds are negligible, about 1 to 2 miles per hour out of the southwest. We'll be moving from out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour in just a couple of hours. And we'll continue later on tonight out of the northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour, as we normally do. So it looks like we're going to be pleasant weather for the foreseeable future. Looks like mid to upper 70s, and then maybe into the mid 80s as we get later on in the 10-day window that I am looking at. Daytime UV is very high at 8. Take care if you have that number or any number, to be honest with you. You know, take care. Get some shade on you. Grass pollen is very high around here. Knock on wood, I'm not affected by grass pollen. Knock on wood. Acacias, when the acacias came into bloom, that would kill me. Pressure is holding steady at 29.94 inches. Visibility is down to 7 miles because of the cloudy conditions, and relative humidity is 81%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased, and these people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Indeed. When I said it's lovely weather around here, that's discounting, and I don't want to minimize the terrible deluge that parts of the East Coast got. My God, that wall of water that came down through that little town. Ooh, boy. Don't want to be there. So, yeah, it's not good everywhere, because it looks like right now London is 61 with a thunderstorm. Paris is 70 with mostly cloudy, and Rome is 84 and right now fair. But they are all under weather advisories for thunderstorm activity and flooding. So I guess that weather system that was along the East Coast made its way to the continent already. It looks like the whole continent is getting inundated by biblical floods. Yeah, okay. Well, Kiev is 81 and fair. Kabul is 73 and fair. No wedding parties today, folks, please. Okay, the drones are out in force. It looks like a forecast of heavy drones with possibility of bombs raining on wedding parties. Hong Kong is 81 and clear. Tokyo is 71 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 59 with rain. San Francisco, California is 56 and sunny with a small craft advisory, gusts into gale force, which means that's around 60 miles per hour. Be careful. I'm telling you, it's not just the resonant waves, but that whole bowl of the bay, bounces the wind too. So be careful out there if you're sailing, or even if you're motoring. It's tough. And New York is 75 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. Another fantastic day to boo Rudy Giuliani and friends. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people live around the world. First offering here at the Chef's Table of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays is by Robert Reich. Yeah, former Treasury Secretary, now teaching at UC Berkeley. Well, he's penned this for Alternate about the glorification and mortification in Trump's brain that can tip either way at any moment. He begins mentioning that he spent last week at a conference in South Korea, during which time Trump went from seeking a meeting with Kim Jong-un to canceling it, then suggesting it might be back on again. What does Trump want? South Korean officials at the conference kept asking me. Notably, no one asked what the United States wants. They knew it was all about Trump. Trump's goal has nothing to do with peace on the Korean Peninsula or even with making America great again. It's all about making Trump feel great again and again and again. Now, that's in this reporter's opinion. I added a little bit on there to Robert's prose there, just because I can. Should I? Back to Robert Reich. They are respecting us again, Trump exulted to graduating cadets at the Naval Academy last Friday. Winning is such a great feeling, isn't it? Nothing like winning. You gotta win. Even when you cheat, I don't know. I never like to be a participant in sports where we won by cheating. I never wanted to be involved in a business where our success was predicated upon cheating. I never paid a bribe to a building inspector in my life, and my friends, we all decided we weren't going to work that way, and if there were municipalities that you had to do that, we didn't build in those municipalities. Sorry. But I guess it's new America now, isn't it? Feels great again, doesn't it? Ugh. In truth, the United States has not won anything in Korea or anywhere else. After 15 months of Trump at the helm, America is far less respected around the world than it was before. Yeah. The only thing that's happened is Trump is now making foreign policy on his own, without America's allies, without Congress, even without the State Department. Trump may consider this a personal win, but it hardly makes America safer. Some earnest foreign policy experts are seeking to discover some bargaining strategy behind Trump's moves on North Korea. Hint, there is no strategy. Only a thin-skinned narcissist needing flattery and fearing ridicule. You know, glorification or mortification. You know, maybe Trump should have tried to venture into writing and getting it published. I mean, for real. Because if you can't handle rejection, you can't be a writer. Well, not for long. Or maybe the cumulative effect will make you go the way of Hemingway. Hemingway never really had to suffer the pains of that kind of rejection, though, I fear. Because he was a journalist. He worked for a living. That's how he got started. So Robert Reich goes on to talk about how Trump got excited about a summit with Kim, and even a possibility of a Nobel Peace Prize because the black president got one, and he has to get one now too. He rejected the 2015 Iran treaty for no apparent reason other than Obama had entered into it. Trump couldn't care less that by doing so, he has harmed relations with our traditional allies, who pleaded with him to stay in. Well, our traditional allies really have been the adversaries of one Vladimir Putin now, haven't they? Funny how that works. So he goes after Jeff Bezos because he doesn't like that Bezos is a successful trillionaire and owns a newspaper, the Washington Post. I don't know. Bezos doesn't really dictate the journalism part now, does he? Opinion part of the paper has always been somewhat the purview of the publisher. But, Trump can't handle that. He can't handle the fact that he's got Fox News, but really it's Murdoch running that. Any halfway responsible president of the United States would be worried about Russian meddling in U.S. elections. Protecting American democracy is just about the most important thing a president does, Robert Reich continues here. But Trump has turned the inquiry about the Russians into a dark state conspiracy against him. And he's demanded that the Justice Department investigate the people who are investigating him. With Trump, there's no longer American foreign policy. There's only Trump's ego. And I would say that there's no real law and order. It's just what Trump decides is the law, and he gives the orders. Now, Robert Reich concludes, if peace is truly advanced on the Korean Peninsula, the Nobel Prize shouldn't go to Trump. It should go to South Korean President Moon Jae-in, who has tirelessly courted the world's two most dangerous megalomaniacs.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout. c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Last offering here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Taylor Lake at Salon. Now, at Yankee Stadium yesterday, Giuliani couldn't even draw a polite round of applause for his birthday, speaking to his ruined legacy in the community. Instead, Yankee fans viciously booed Giuliani on Memorial Day. A humiliating blow for the former mayor who oversaw the aftermath of September 11th. I don't know. I thought he was a political opportunist. He's the one that was carrying on a dalliance with his aide that he eventually married. You know, I mean, it was all salacious, right? And he moved secure positions in the most dangerous parts of the buildings. So come on. I don't know. So the 74-year-old has never been the most popular political figure in the five boroughs, but reports from Yankee Stadium suggest his support has reached an all-time low. Sounds like FU to me, with the UCK added in. So Giuliani spends most of his days lately on TV, where he steadfastly defends Donald Trump, serving as his personal attorney. I think it's a TV attorney. All right. Now, my brother is, I'll just give a little bit of a secret here. He's a bailiff on one of those court shows. Now, according to him, these are actual courts, you know. At least maybe he's method acting. Could be. He's been a cop. But, so Giuliani seems like a TV lawyer, not like, you know, like he plays one on TV because he certainly doesn't seem very lawyerly. So there's a big question about where Trump's going to live because New York doesn't seem to like Giuliani, and they've always had a dubious relationship with Donald Trump because of his mob ties and the shoddy building practices. So maybe he'll live in Mar-a-Lago, but they don't like him there either, you know, because he's new money. He's just, you know, if you think Rush Limbaugh is ostentatious, look at Trump's digs. Ugh. So while many Americans are unconcerned about Trump's welfare after the White House, the notion that Trump cannot return home is unrivaled in recent memory. Former President Barack Obama has already dedicated much of his post-presidency to building his presidential library in his hometown of Chicago. New Yorkers are likely not ready to start thinking about a Trump library. In their defense, it's kind of an absurd idea. An absurd concept now, isn't it? I don't know. Maybe they've already started building the Trump library, you know, near the Kremlin. Maybe he can live there. Maybe he could live there. They'll like him. He could share, you know, like a whole complex with Steven Seagal and others. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for today, and it's been fun. At least I've had some fun. Okay, we have to laugh our way through all of this pain and anguish. Okay, and vote like hell, all of us. All right, and those who aren't voting, we got to get them out to vote too. All right. That said, let's meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. That's what we do around here, and we like to do it every week. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio for the rest of the day. There's always breaking news, and you'll be hearing it as it breaks. And we'll meet up with you tomorrow here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.